I fear that the U.S. is lurching toward a consolidated market structure like the one that has emerged in China.
Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another CYPRX video banger. This video breakdown is going to be absolutely monumental, and everyone in the crypto space or involved in the Web3 ecosystem should pay attention to the information that I have pieced together for you all in this video breakdown. We are going to cover the agenda that is ongoing behind the scenes to usher in a CBDC and crush the digital asset ecosystem. If you all enjoy this video breakdown, do us a favor, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the platform, please. Again, it'll help boost the YouTube algorithm and push this video out to more like-minded individuals like yourselves. Do us a favor, comment in the description down below if you enjoy this video breakdown, and share this video on your social media platforms. Let's try and get this video trending. If you've been a follower of CYPRX for some time, this video is going to break it all down for you. Now, there are some things that I could not put in this video breakdown because I want to upload it on YouTube. And then also, there are some pieces of the puzzle that I leave out, mainly due to the length of this video breakdown and me actually wanting to get a solid point across. So the first series of video clips that we're going to get into, we know that we are on the forefront of this digital transformation and that the whole entire financial infrastructure is for a fact changing hands.
Because the US payment system deeply, desperately needs it. It needs your ideas, it needs your technologies, it needs your policies, it needs your passion to get it ready and equipped for that digital century that we know is already here. So, we know, I think in this room, that the US payment system has undergone a structural transformation over the last 3 or 4 years, certainly since the pandemic.
Now, one of the things that they are attempting to usher in on a global scale is the implementation of CBDCs. Now, we know in order for CBDCs to be widely adopted by normal, everyday, average people, there needs to be some type of demand for that CBDC. Now, particularly, I'm focusing my attention on the United States. I cannot speak for the rest of the world, but I can speak for the US because I'm here. I'm a US citizen. I served in the United States military, so I have a firm understanding of the way that the United States system works, the United States government works. And in my personal opinion, in order for them to usher in this new CBDC system, this new digital infrastructure, this tracking, controlling, and monitoring of all of our transactions, there is going to need to be some type of systemic shock that takes place that creates a demand for the utilization of these CBDCs. Now, listen to these panel discussions talk about that in particular, and then listen to what Caitlin Long says about the consolidation of the banking system. And my personal belief, that will be one of the many things that leads into the ushering in of a CBDC. When all of these banks, these financial institutions start to consolidate and start to create a more centralized environment, right? Just take a second and listen to what these representatives on these panel discussions have to say.
Even though I haven't lived in America for 6 years, I'm very familiar with the way that monetary and fiscal policy work over there. And you have a very divisive and opinionated public over there. And you've got a lot of people who happily go along with the things that the government asks them to do. And then you have a lot of people who ask questions and wonder if this is really in their own best interest. Right now, I think it would be very unpopular to try to enter a CBDC into the American population. And they know that, right? And they know, and I don't think that America has been watching China work on a CBDC for 5 or 6 years and doesn't have one in their back pocket ready to go. I think that they absolutely do. The question is, how are they going to implement it, right? And we know that the government, unfortunately in America, left the great vision of a very radical idea with very minimal government intervention and very much a pure democracy to a very controlling state, where you saw that even more recently than ever with lockdowns. But in order for them to usher in a radical new idea, they need to create an environment to where the public is asking for it, right? And you have a very particular time in America happening right now where you have CPI or inflation increasing, still not under control. Interest rates are higher than ever. Bond markets are crashing. The highest stimulus injection into the economy ever outside of wartime and pandemic was just announced by the Biden administration, almost $1 trillion. We're inflating the monetary supply by over $1 trillion a year for the past 20-something years on average. So you have a very, very unsustainable system that's happening right now that they cannot kick the can down the road much longer. People are starting to lose faith in the ability for the US to pay back their debts. This is why the bond market is not doing so well. And people are going to look elsewhere to put their money. So how do you implement something like a CBDC, which gives much more control to the government over what you choose to do with your money? Things like if they need to stimulate the economy, they can make it so that your money expires if you don't use it after a certain period of time. Well, they need an event to happen where people are asking for it. So in my opinion, the way that the US CBDC gets introduced is eventually probably 2025, 2026, after you have the elections that come through and you have essentially what's looking like hyperinflation. Something has to break. We all know that something has to break. The Fed has said it many times in the past. And people like Ray Dalio and other people are calling for this. Lots of data to back this up. So this looks like a 1930s, Great Depression type of event that happens. This will put everybody out of work. This will put everybody out of food, and people will be scared, right? People who have had safety and security, food and shelter will be scared for the first time in a long time and not knowing what to do, right? And then you will have whoever is in office and running at the time will come out with the solution, right? Everyone's really hungry, scared, out of work, doesn't have any money. And so the solution will be, hey, we are modern, we're hip, we're cool, we use blockchain. It's not real blockchain, it's a centralized blockchain, but we use blockchain. And we have a way better monetary system. The guys in the past, they tried their best, it was a failed system. Now we're putting everything on blockchain, it's gonna be transparent, you guys can trust us, blah, blah, blah. And we know that you're hurting right now, we're sorry the economy sucks. All you have to do is download this app, scan your face, connect all your accounts, and we will instantly send you, $1,200 of stimulus so that you can go buy food and groceries and, pay your mortgage, pay your rent. And this has to happen. I already know right now that that it will not be openly accepted with open arms, but as we know, when the US had all of their privacy stripped away from them after 9/11, they made this huge bill about the Patriot Act and how it was going to be the anti-terrorist bill, but what they really did was sign away all of our rights to privacy, for them to wiretap our phones and look at all of our conversations. This would have never happened if you didn't have this big event happen prior that made everybody terrified of terrorists. And so these events happen in America. It's historically known. CIA leaks. This is not. I'm not wearing a conspiracy theory hat. I'm just being logical, in my opinion, anyway. So CBDC is something, and I hope that other governments and things like that do it in a way that is beneficial for the people. I don't think America's will be.
The thing that we need to remember about America is that it will, and I think it was Winston Churchill who said that America can be trusted to do the wrong thing until they absolutely have to do the right thing. And they'll do everything else until they're forced to do the right thing, and they just meander from one crisis to the next, and that's how America creates global trends.
Right. So I agree with the catalyst. A catalyst is always necessary.
I thought after 2008. Regulations were changed to prevent situations like this. I thought banks were meant to be stress tested to ensure we wouldn't see such a similar situation. Were the regulations not strong enough, or were the regulations wrong?
Well, the large banks, the regulations were strong enough. It's the community banks. And see, we have these regional community banks in the US that the UK and most of the rest of the world don't have. There are 4,236 banks in the United States, right? If you think about the banking that you have in the UK, it's a small number of very large national champions, to use that phrase. And I think that's where the bank regulators in Washington, D.C. want the U.S. banking system to go. They've certainly engineered what is likely to be an enormous wave of consolidation. I
fear that the U.S. is lurching toward a consolidated market structure like the one that has emerged in China, that blurs the lines between payments and commerce and creates the incentives for excessive surveillance and even financial censorship.
Now, another very interesting thing that Caitlin Long says on a panel discussion is how during the banking crisis back in 2023, at the beginning of the year, regulators knew what was happening. Regulators saw behind the scenes that this was all taking place, and they sat around and did absolutely nothing, which again reiterates the ideology that this is all systemically planned, organized, well orchestrated behind the scenes, behind the entities that are in control of our monetary system as a strategic plan to get something done. Take a second and listen.
So it's a pretty dicey situation. You see it in the bank stocks. You see it in the balance sheets of the banks in what's called the call reports. Their balance sheets have been eroded, and the community and regional banks were not subject to the same capital requirements. That's why the big banks came through this environment better, because they were forced to hedge the interest rate risk. And when you go look at the balance sheets of your banks, it's not difficult to figure out whether the banks are actually solvent or not. Right. The problem is that the U.S. interest rate environment became so the Fed went through a tightening cycle that was so fast that and so much money they got whipsawed. You've heard the phrase whipsaw effect in the bullwhip effect. Sorry, in the retail market. Right. Think about the toilet paper shortage in COVID. What happened? Well, we all stayed home, so the toilet paper that was manufactured for the offices sat idle while there was a shortage of toilet paper for households, okay? And then they massively retooled to fill the demand of toilet paper in households, and then there was a glut of toilet paper for households, and then we all started going back to the office, and there's a shortage in the office again, okay? That's called the bullwhip effect. It takes markets a while to adjust. And that happened here as well in the banking community with the interest rate environment, because the Fed injected so many reserves into the system, trillions during COVID, and the banks had to invest in something, but no one was borrowing. So what did they do? They lent it to the U.S. government, but they took long-term. They bought 10-year and 30-year treasuries. Well, they funded it with demand deposits. Okay, so when interest rates went up, those 10 and 30-year treasuries got marked down to say 70 cents on the dollar. Okay, so they had a 30-cent unrealized loss. Is the U.S. government going to pay it back? Yeah, it is in devalued dollars. Okay, but you see where the bullwhip effect it happened. All this cash went into the banks, and then they didn't have a place to put it, so they put it in long-term bonds because the short-term stuff back then was yielding zero. And then when the scare came and everybody wanted their money back, they had to start selling those bonds at a loss, and that's what took down Silicon Valley Bank. This is not rocket science, folks. It is amazing how bank regulators we're watching as this happened, and we're not forcing the smaller banks to do better on interest rate risk management. It is amazing how bank regulators were watching as this happened, and we're not forcing the smaller banks to do better on interest rate risk management.
I mean, it's a little bit conflicted, right? I mean, it's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they're going to be.
People need to know, but I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you put this out. Like, why are they telling me this? Should I be concerned about my bank? Like, my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. If they just assume they're going to pay my claim. Right? I think you've got to think of the unintended consequences of taking a public that has more full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do. More full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do.
So the next series of video clips that I have to play for you guys, if the ones that I've played so far haven't blown your mind, is the gentleman on the panel discussion with Caitlin Long asking her, why have regulators attempted to stifle this innovation? And in my personal opinion, and I'm going to show you all supporting evidence, they got caught off guard. Who was they? The public sector, the central banks, right? They got caught off guard by the private sector innovation. Innovation like Ripple technology, like the digital asset XRP, the ability to, from a peer-to-peer transaction, send money cross-border in a matter of seconds, right? And the central banks weren't going to allow that adoption to flourish without their involvement. We know that the financial market participants that control the entire financial system of this world got caught off guard, and that they weren't going to let these technological advancements supersede where they were at technologically. Now, another reason, again, from my personal perspective and the research that I've done as to why they are attempting to stall adoption, is because they want control. They want control over everybody's money, over everybody's transactions, and they want to be able to turn a switch on and off via person's independent spending habits and so on and so forth. Take a second and listen.
And it's going to hurt this industry again, because, like I said, there's going to be a huge consolidation wave in banks. I started my investment banking career in the 1990s. Right after the Fed went through a tightening cycle. And literally since then, the number of banks in the U.S. has been cut in half. It's going to get cut in half again. But the impact to this industry, which is constantly kind of playing cat and mouse because the banks keep closing accounts under Operation Choke Point 2.0, the impact of this industry is that basically nobody's operating with just one bank account, because everybody's afraid that the banks are going to debank them. Well, Custodia's here, the little bank that could, to fight against that. We don't have the FDIC pressures that other banks have, and we don't have those balance sheet pressures because we were never going to do that borrow short and lend long business model that I just talked about, which is upside down right now. And most of the banks that the small regional and community banks in the U.S. have real balance sheet impairment right now. But hell, if you're a company in this industry and you need a bank account, you can't afford not to bank with a bank that's going to open a bank account for you, even if it's an impaired bank. But you got to watch the counterparty credit risk.
So it sounds like you're building a responsible bank.
Yeah.
What a crazy idea. Why did the regulators, why have they throttled or attempted to throttle everything you're doing?
The number one thing about Web3 is it allows for censorship-resistant things, censorship-resistant money, censorship-resistant data, censorship-resistant software. The idea of taking large language models and putting them on a blockchain so nobody can deny access to them, to anybody, to a bad person or a good person, is such a powerful idea. That is why this technology is so important, and it's why it scares the out of the government.
Yes, but I think you also have to keep in mind they're very cognizant of the recent liquidity and market event that we're going through. And, depending on the bank's balance sheet strength and positioning coming out of these recent market events, I think they're also facing this near-term pressure of reassuring their customer base that deposits are safe and the bank is strong. Regulators are asking questions on things like interest rate risk management, liquidity management. And so they're kind of in this, these recent market events have forced them to, make sure the core banking franchise is solid. But I still, there are strategic initiatives. Some are saying this is an opportunity. Maybe we can make an acquisition. Maybe we can, keep building this product capability. And so I think some see it as an opportunity. In fact, both the crypto failures and the market events have maybe bought some time for some, at least in the U.S. Both the crypto failures and the market events have maybe bought some time for some, at least in the U.S. Europe and
ability to value the economics of the instrument that we were going to use to transfer. So I've been watching this evolving differently. I haven't been watching the technology pull along the interest in use. I've been watching the needs of an industry calling for this development. And it's at two levels. What I call the micro level, the transactions that are needed to be done quickly and cost effectively and efficiently. And it's increasing. At first it was, once every couple of months I'd get a call, hey, we've got this problem, this idea, and we were able to use digital assets to solve it. Now it's every day. And what I'm seeing at the same time is a growing recognition from the traditional providers that they're going to have to compete with this, because we are starting to work around the use of banks and banking rails and the traditional payment rails by using digital assets in different ways. Is a growing recognition from the traditional providers that they're going to have to compete with this, because we are starting to work around the use of banks and banking rails and the traditional payment rails by using digital assets in different ways. And so what I'm now seeing is the evolution of the major players defending territory. This is going to move ahead rapidly. Why? Because the banks and the governments are going to make it move rapidly. They are going to take control of their portion of the business. This is going to move ahead rapidly. Why? Because the banks and the governments are going to make it move rapidly. They are going to take control of their portion of the business. And that's where we're going to see a lot of the next evolution. The banks are slowly getting the power to deal, particularly in stablecoins and particularly fiat-backed stablecoins. They're going to be able to collateralize loans against them. I spent a good part of my morning this morning working on a platform and program for the collateralization of digital assets and the use of stablecoins for the funding in and out of the platform. And so we're going to see a lot of it. So that's how I look at how this industry is evolving and developing. The methods of delivery, I think, are coming closer together. The very fact that, sort of side by side with stable coins, or in fact a form of stable coin, you're getting into the central bank issue. And, which was a natural evolution that I saw coming probably 8 or 9 years ago, which is that the central banks will never let this all escape. And the central banks will, in quotes, get into the business. you're getting into the central bank issue. And, which was a natural evolution that I saw coming probably 8 or 9 years ago, which is that the central banks will never let this all escape. And the central banks will, in quotes, get into the business.
Now, I know that that sounds very conspiratorial, but let's really tap in and dig into the details. One thing is being projected to the masses while the real information is being suppressed. And I'm going to show you all multiple examples. So here, Caitlin Long goes on to talk about Operation Choke Point 2.0, how they're attempting to attack and diminish the cryptocurrency market and the reputation that the digital asset ecosystem holds by saying that it's utilized for things like illicit market purposes. You can see Gary Gensler's overall attack on the digital asset space. You can see participants like Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan saying publicly on CNBC and Fox News and testimonies in front of Congress that cryptocurrency is only utilized for illicit market purposes. But let me show you all the things that the mainstream is never going to show you. And remember, if it was once or twice, we could chalk it up to coincidence. But when it's 3 different scenarios that you can prove back to back to back, it just does not sit well. At least here, again, at CYPRX, real recognize real. And when you see these things, you start to generate questions. And again, questions that are going unanswered. So, for example, to the general public, Elizabeth Warren is pumped out as this individual who is against cryptocurrency because of its utilization of illicit market purposes. Check this out.
Why have they throttled or attempted to throttle everything you're doing?
Well, I think if you read the public information, you can determine that it was Operation Choke Point 2.0. There is no question. And we knew about that the moment that the Fed denied us. It turned out we were the tip of the spear, but how did we know about it? I can talk about this a little bit more now than I could back then because the government leaked it to the press and we had reporters hounding us 2 days before the Fed voted to deny our application that we were going to be voted down. Supposedly, this is an independent Fed, right? Okay, but the White House was involved, we subsequently found out. And the impact is that because we weren't responding to the reporters, they finally emailed us and said, we have been told that every bank that has a crypto component has simultaneously been asked to withdraw their applications. Well, wait a minute. We were all supposed to be standing on our own, right? We have due process rights. And yet this was this coordinated approach across all the agencies. And now it's subsequently crystal clear. It's a coordinated approach across all of the U.S. government agencies to try to kill crypto. But the funny thing is they failed. And so some of us are fighting. We're winning in the courts. Obviously, so we've seen some of the court cases against the SEC. Still more to come. And of course, ours is as well against the Fed. And so, yeah, we're right now, unless and until there's a change in the Biden administration, we're stuck with the Operation Choke Point 2.0. I don't expect that to change at all. Even if Marty Gruenberg, there are a lot of people now calling for his resignation over the Wall Street Journal revelations, which are pretty salacious. And again, he's the guy who started Operation Choke Point 1.0 and Operation Choke Point 2.0. But even if he does end up having to resign over all those salacious allegations, I don't think we would necessarily get anyone any better.
It sounds very un-American.
It's very un-American. Well, and I asked, what's interesting, Peter? I'm glad you said that because multiple people have come forward to me. Washington, D.C. is a sieve. There are no secrets. We had the first insider come forward the weekend after the Fed denied us and told us everything that happened. And it was just very clear that what was happening to us was political. It was not on the merits. The impact is one of the other insiders subsequent to that, as I've been talking about this on podcasts, more insiders have come forward. And one of them, I asked the question, essentially the same question you just did. And I said, well, what is driving Elizabeth Warren to do what she's doing? Because he pointed out that she's basically in control of all the financial services appointees in the Biden administration. I can't prove this, but multiple people have now talked about it, including Novogratz, who's a big Democrat and has tried to meet with her, but apparently she won't meet with him. It's now it's not even a secret. It was an open secret for a while. It's not even a secret anymore. There was a deal apparently cut between Biden and Warren that she got to put her people in those positions. And as you know, she's very anti-crypto. And what was driving it? And the answer, the same question you asked me, was this person who's a moderate Democrat. He said they're all Leninists. They want a central bank digital currency. They don't believe in private industry, and they certainly don't believe in having any private banking.
But I remember when I first got into Bitcoin, seeing videos of Elizabeth Warren campaigning and taking to holding the feet to the fire of Wall Street, of the banks. And now she seems to have flipped in the last 2-3 years, and now seems to be in the pockets of Wall Street and the banks. I don't understand it because Jason Meyer's written a brilliant book about why Democrats should embrace Bitcoin.
There's some really powerful arguments by progressives for why they should embrace Bitcoin. Yes, absolutely.
So what has changed with her? I don't understand it.
There's a new threat out there. It's crypto, and it is being used for terrorist financing. It is being used for drug trafficking. North Korea is using it to pay for about half of its nuclear weapons program. We can't allow that to continue.
The money used in offshore crypto exchanges internationally to fund terrorist organizations in the Middle East is a fraction of a percent. It is at best marginal. And what we're seeing from policymakers now, crypto skeptic policymakers, the most obvious one in the United States is Senator Elizabeth Warren, is an opportunistic attack on the industry. She has certain bills that she has been pushing, and those bills were dying, were not having much momentum. And following these attacks, she shifted her attention from Energy FUD right to Terror Nexus FUD to sort of opportunistically take advantage of that momentum. And so we are doing our best to combat that.
So what are some of the lawmakers trying to accomplish through this misinformation? Because I was listening to a regulator recently speak, and the concern there is, well, we don't have enough control. Right? Like, it's not regulated enough, it's decentralized, we're now going to assert ourselves into this jurisdiction because of the fact that there's not enough regulation in some aspects of it. So it seems more of, wanting to maintain a level of control over things as opposed to, wanting to allow this decentralized ecosystem to just kind of naturally thrive or see where it goes.
I think you're spot on there.
Is there any counter perspective that you can give? Because I'm pretty sure 98% of money laundering is still done in cash. Like, very, very little actually happens in cryptocurrency. I mean, unmarked bills from US dollars traveling all around the world is the best way to launder anything versus...
Yeah, it is, I think, between 3 and 5% of illicit financing is in fiat, and 3 to 5% of fiat is used for illicit purposes, whereas it's a fraction of a percent for crypto. But
the comment, though, I disagree with Matt, is that the majority of this technology is being used for nefarious purposes. That's just simply not true. We have loads and loads and years worth of data that demonstrate that that's not the case. Something like 1 point something percent or less than 1% of on-chain transactions is deemed to have any kind of illicit element attached to it.
However, behind the scenes, for a fact, it is actually a reality that illicit transactions in the digital asset space are very minuscule and very small compared to cash transactions, which is the primary choice for illicit market purposes, terrorist organizations, and so on and so forth, not digital assets. Why? Because cryptocurrency transactions on the blockchain can be tracked, controlled, and monitored.
And then add to that the fraud factor, which started in early 2013 or 2012, which was kind of a bad reputation. But in reality, if you look now, the fraud has kind of winded down a lot, because who wants to transact and then get his transaction identified for fraud? So now you can technically be tracked. I would have loved the system to be adopted more, but if I was a fraudster, I wouldn't do it on a blockchain.
Now, another thing I mentioned is how these individuals are flip-flopping, how at the early stages of their careers, they were actually pro-crypto, but now that there's some hidden agenda, they are seeming to be against it. Let me utilize Gary Gensler as an example. This type of activity, unless there was a hidden agenda behind it, makes absolutely no sense. If you all don't know, Gary Gensler was an individual who hosted discussions on cryptocurrency at MIT. Here's one of those video breakdowns where he is actually seeming to be pro digital assets, particularly focused on XRP.
Bitcoin to Philippine peso. That is called a bridge crypto or bridge currency. That's in fact what Ripple is trying to do with XRP. So Ripple is a company that started as a payment messaging service to compete with SWIFT. And that messaging service, which we'll talk about more Thursday, has been adopted by many banks. More recently, in 2018, they rolled out a prototype of using a crypto token, XRP, as a bridge currency.
Now, fast forward to the agenda forefront, again, under President Biden's administration, you can see that Gary Gensler is 110% against cryptocurrency, at least to the general public.
This is a highly speculative asset class. One could just look at the volatility of Bitcoin in the last few days. And look, I grew up loving roller coasters. Maybe in my adult years, I don't ride them as much, but you really should be conscious as the investing public that this is a bit of a roller coaster ride on these volatile assets. And then the question is how firm is the foundation?
Now listen to this gentleman talk about Staff Accounting Bulletin 121 and how it stifles innovation amongst financial institutions. It does not allow them an environment to actually participate in the digital asset ecosystem. It actually stops them from participating in the digital asset ecosystem. So again, this was issued by the SEC, whom again, Gary Gensler is the chair of. So take that into consideration. They're actually pumping out rules and regulations to stall adoption, to stop financial institutions who would otherwise help this ecosystem grow and stabilize it. They're stopping them from entering into this space.
Yeah, so Staff Accounting Bulletin 121 was issued by the Office of the Chief Accountant at the SEC, and it essentially kind of had at its core two main requirements. One is that entities that are safekeeping or custodying digital assets needed to include a number of disclosures to their clients, risk disclosures in their financial statements about the risks associated with that, which makes a lot of sense. And then the second aspect was to ensure that those entities include on their balance sheet both an asset and a liability equal to the fair market value of those assets. And for most public companies that this applies to, who are not banks, it's more of a reporting exercise. It doesn't have a fundamental impact to the way they run their business. For a custody bank or a bank in general, when you put an asset on your balance sheet, that means you need to hold capital against that asset. So it makes the activity of custodying assets much more expensive for the bank. And so as we go through this process and we have SAB 121, it essentially provides a hindrance for banks to be getting into this business because it makes it a lot more expensive. Traditionally, in custody of traditional assets, those do not go on the balance sheet. So this is it makes the activity more expensive than it would otherwise be. And I think there's a challenge here too, because as I mentioned, a core aspect of what a custody bank does and what a bank does generally is to ensure that we are doing things in a safe and a sound manner, and that we're managing our clients' assets in a way that facilitates financial stability. By having SAB 121, it makes it harder for banks, who are the entities that are kind of most suited to bringing stability to the digital asset industry. It kind of keeps them out. By having SAB 121, it makes it harder for banks, who are the entities that are kind of most suited to bringing stability to the digital asset industry. It kind of keeps them out.
How does that make any sense? How does that not physically prove that there is some type of agenda happening behind the scenes, stopping financial institutions and market participants from entering into this space? Now, the last example that I have is JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon, how publicly he always goes on to talk about his ill-perceived perspective on the digital asset space, saying it's used for illicit market purposes and so on and so forth, which we've already proved in previous videos that is not to be the case and is not accurate information. However, if you go to JP Morgan and you attempt to get involved in digital assets and cryptocurrency, you can at their financial institution.
I've always been deeply opposed to crypto, Bitcoin, etc. You pointed out the only true use case for it is criminals, drug traffickers, anti-money laundering, tax avoidance, and that is a use case because it is somewhat anonymous, not fully, and because you can move money instantaneously, and because it doesn't go through, as you mentioned, all these systems have built up over many years, know your customer, sanctions, OFAC, they can get bypass all of that. If I was the government, I'd close it down.
Okay.
Yeah, but I was also pointing out is that the actual use cases are sex trafficking, tax avoidance, anti-money laundering, terrorism financing. It's not people just buying and selling Bitcoin. There's no value to if you're buying and selling Bitcoin.
Now, last point I'll make is that I called JP Morgan. That's Jamie Dimon. JP Morgan crypto is a pet rock. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Not my cup of tea.
Yeah, we should shut it down. If I was the government, we would shut it down. These are direct quotes from Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan. And I asked the private banker there, can I put IBIT, which is the BlackRock shares, in my personal account? And they got back to me and said they're accepting orders on a non-solicited basis. So if you call there and you ask them to buy it for you, they will. I don't think people understand how seismic that is. I don't think people understand the opportunity.
We've also heard representatives from JP Morgan particularly mention in 2023 that the general public should be focused on cryptocurrencies and that they think it's extremely important.
We at JP Morgan obviously are a meaningful player in this space, we think that the whole crypto DLT technology is very exciting, and that is something that one should take very seriously. So from that perspective, I think that's good.
So why is one narrative being directed to the general public when behind the scenes another narrative is actually taking place, and the narrative that's happening behind the scenes are the actual facts? And the facts is that cryptocurrencies are not primarily utilized for illicit market purposes. Yes, of course, a very small percentage of digital asset transactions are used for illicit purposes, but are predominantly driven in cash transactions. Again.
So I've never met her. She was my law school roommate's favorite professor at Harvard Law School. She is a renowned scholar in bankruptcy law. I don't know what's driving it. And Ryan Selkis asked this of Novogratz, right? He's one of the biggest Democratic donors, and she won't even meet with him. But he said he's on stage when Ryan asked him at MainNet what's driving this. And Novogratz couldn't answer, but he said, I've talked to all of her staffers and they disagree with her. So she stands alone even within her office in how virulent her views against this industry are. The only thing that makes sense to me, and again, I'm speculating, I can't prove this, this is just what insiders have come forward to tell me, is that she really wants to tear down to build back better. And that definition is that there will not be any private financial institutions, and we will all be banking at the Fed. And they will be able to turn on and off our access to our money based on what they desire. That's what Operation Choke Point 1.0 is, and Operation Choke Point 2.0 as well, right? It's basically saying certain industries can get access to their money and certain industries cannot. Wait till they do. Certain people can get access to their money and certain people cannot. I have heard of individuals who've had bank accounts closed just for sending a wire to Coinbase and the like. So that happened to you, yeah?
Three times.
Yeah.
Now, I hope this video breakdown did its due diligence to show you that there is, for a fact, something happening behind the scenes. The ushering in of a CBDC system and the way in which that could potentially start to unfold. So make sure that you all prepared for that, just in case. Again, it is speculative. And is it the exact pinpointed thing that is happening? I'm not here to guarantee that, but I'm here to show you all that something for a fact is happening behind the scenes, and more people need to ask questions about it. More people need to make content like this and pay attention to detail, because something is going on, and that something is going to be absolutely catastrophic and monumental if more people don't get involved and start paying attention. And then the second thing that this video proved is that there is, for a fact, an ongoing agenda to crush digital assets in the cryptocurrency space. With that being said, do us a favor, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the platform. It will help push this video out to more individuals and like-minded people like yourselves. We really do appreciate the love and the support. As always, many blessings to you guys. Be cognizant, be aware out there, and I will see you all in the next video breakdown.